Hey there, I'm glad you could join me for Perkstream this June 2nd, 2021. Can you hear this? Hey, I'm glad you're here today. This is Pastor Mike and bringing you Perkstream for June 2nd, 2021. Today we're going to continue our core series where we are looking at exercises that can strengthen our inner being to meet the outer realities. So thanks for joining me here in the gazebo, and thanks for taking time out of your day to watch this. Hoping that you will gain something from it. Also, I will fill you in on the latest with our associate pastor calling. I will talk a little bit about masks, and I will talk a little bit about live streaming. So we'll get to those in just a moment. But just want to talk a little bit about the core workouts we've been doing. We've been talking about this investment of time to strengthen our inner being. It's been a hard year. Things don't look to get easier, even as we're adjusting back to what we might call normal. But what could we do for our inner being so that should something else arise, we have inner strength to meet the outer reality? Well, one thing we talked about was Scripture, and the other thing we talked about was solitude. Scripture, being in the Scripture regularly, reading it. Solitude, being in a place where we can speak with God and help get things in our heads sorted out, so to speak. Well, the third thing I want to talk about is probably my hardest investment, and it really is for me, and that is silence. Because in silence, you sit with God and you let God speak. And the reason that's hard for me is because it means I got to get my mind to shut down. And the very first time I made an investment of time in silence was on a backpacking trip. I was part of a group of people who were making a 7-day journey across part of a national forest. And we were given a day called a solo. And in that solo, we didn't interact with anybody else. We didn't see anybody else for 24 hours. And in that 24-hour period, I had a lot of time to reflect on what had just transpired in the last 6 days. I had some time to think about what is God doing in me as a person, what about my relationships, all sorts of things. But part of what I needed to do was slow my mind down enough to be able to hear what God might be saying in all of that. What was God trying to communicate to me, and was I really listening? So it took a while, but I did get something out of that solo time. And when I have taken time to invest time in silence, I have found that God will speak. I just, in part, need to be listening. A question that may come up for some people is, in silence you're letting God speak, so how do I know it's God's voice? Well, one thing I am very sure about, and one thing I have a very strong conviction about, is when God speaks, He can make His voice distinct from any other voice that we might be thinking is talking. There was a time when a person came to my office in my Eugene, Oregon space, and he came in and he basically came in and unloaded a series of accusations at me. It was meant to be very confrontational. I finally had to ask him to leave, but after he left, I just sat there shaking, going, God, is any of this true? What I did is, after making a couple phone calls to friends to pray, I went into the sanctuary and I just sat in silence and I just said, God, is any of this true? And in those moments where I was literally shaking like a leaf, God brought peace through bringing to mind remembrances of events that were direct refutations of everything He had accused me of. In fact, everything that He said I had done, I didn't do, and things that I didn't do, I actually had done. Now, I kind of wish He had brought them to mind during the argument, because then I could have just taken care of it right there. But God wasn't interested in me answering His accusations. What He was interested in me is being at peace in Him and with the truth. And so that moment of silence came as a time when He helped me see, yeah, you're okay, be at peace. And I've enjoyed that memory because it reminds me that not only is God interested in keeping me at peace, but He's also interested in the truth. So that's what that moment brought to me. So the question might be, how do you spend some time in silence? Well, it's very much like solitude, and that is you need to get away from a space that is very familiar, where the distractions that may call you to to something that is unfinished, like housework or repairs, maybe a book you haven't read, or any number of things. The laundry. If you're in a space where you're being reminded of all those things, it's probably time to change locations. I would take two different tablets or two different journals, if you will. And one of them is like mine. This was from a time of silence. You could see I was doodling, and in the doodling, it's very colorful, and because that's sort of how I like to doodle. But that doodling came from a time of silence where God was helping me understand where I was in a time of life. So you want some place where you can record what it is that you are hearing from the Lord. The other tablet is for all those invading thoughts, the undone relationships or the undone housework, the things that are saying, hey, you need to do this. That second tablet is to write down whatever it is that is actually interrupting your time, but you know you've got to get to. By writing it down and saying, okay, I acknowledge that, you can then push that to the side and get back to it later. A couple other key tips. Choose a place where you're not going to be necessarily interacting with other people. You want to hear God's voice, and if people know where to find you, then that's going to maybe take away from some of the silence. So find a place where maybe you can go where you're not going to be interrupted with other people trying to find you. You might say it's like disappearing for a little bit. Yeah, it is. But in that disappearing, you get a chance to hear God's voice. And then give yourself a little bit of time to work into the stillness so that you can hear God speaking. And working into that stillness means clearing your mind out of the stuff that is trying to shout at you. And as you work towards the stillness, make a simple request of God. God, I want to hear your voice. Speak to me. I am listening. There's a great word from King David, who wrote Psalm 63 when he says, my soul finds rest, or my soul sits in silence, waiting for the Lord, because my salvation comes from him. David knew a lot about waiting while he was on the run from King Saul, but he also learned that in any moment where he was in danger, that was sometimes the best time, not to try to do something or fix something. It was the best time to wait and be still and know that God is God and that God would come to his aid and God would speak to him. So there are some tips on finding spaces for silence and letting God speak, letting God give you his word. So you have scripture, you have solitude, you have silence. Next week we're going to talk about strolling. Does that sound just a little bit ambiguous? Good, I'll see you back here next week. In Perk News, this last week we considered the calling of Rolando Zelaya as Associate Pastor for Youth and Family Ministry. As we gave consideration, then we opened up a way for everybody to give their affirmation to that call or to express their concerns. And with a 92% affirmation, we have extended a call to Rolando to come be part of the staff here at Perk Church. The good news is he has accepted that call. And so we are now at a point where Rolando will be joining us in the first part of July. The Zelayas have a trip planned to Honduras that's going to take up part of the end of June and the first week of July. And when they get back, then he'll be starting with us at Perk Church. So we're looking forward to having him be a part of our ministry, of our church family. And please be prepared to welcome them as they come join us in ministry together. Another thing, live streaming is still our goal for Sunday morning worship. This last week, if you tried to join us on the live stream, well, it didn't quite work out. And part of the reason for that is we basically missed a setting. We needed to change our privacy setting from private to public, and we didn't do that. So this week, we'll try to remember that. If you are depending on the live stream so you can join us in real time, join us at 9:30, and then you can also pray we remember to get our settings right. Still planning on a 9:30 live stream this Sunday. Well, here in Pennsylvania, as of this last weekend, we are allowed to be at full capacity in our spaces, businesses, gyms, other spaces that have been limited are now back to 100% capacity, though there is a modified mask requirement. At Perk, we've said that we want people to wear a mask into the building and then remove it when they get to their seat. The state of Pennsylvania has said by June 28th, if we hit certain vaccination benchmarks, we should be able to relieve ourselves also of the mask requirement indoors. When that happens, we will then look at modifying our mask requirement as well. We've also been told it could happen sooner. So stay tuned. When the state of Pennsylvania says that masks are no longer required, then they will no longer be required for our gatherings. As for now, we're still going to say, wear them into the building, take them off when you get to your seat. We will continue to do everything we can to keep us safe under the current circumstances and based on what we know. So thanks for working with us on that. Well, I pray that you have a great week this week, and I pray that in this coming week you have a chance to give yourself some silence and hear God speak, and know that God can make his voice distinct from any other voice, and when he speaks to you, be ready to listen. God bless you. Have a great week. I hope to see you Sunday.